My name is Caleb, and this happened when I was 7 years old during winter break in Arlington, Texas. Even now, at 19, I can still remember almost every detail of that night. People always tell me memories from early childhood get blurry with time. Most of mine have. Birthdays, school field trips, Christmas mornings. They've all faded into scattered flashes, but this stayed crystal clear. Maybe because fear has a way of preserving things. Maybe because some part of me understood, even at that age, how close I came to disappearing. It was December 29th, 2015. That whole week had already been amazing. A few days earlier, my parents had surprised me with tickets to 2 basketball games at the Metroplex Arena in downtown Arlington. I was obsessed with basketball back then. Not because I fully understood the sport, but because everything about it felt larger than life. The roaring crowd, the bright lights, the giant screens hanging over the court. It felt magical. Our first game had been incredible. Close seats, loud fans, a last-minute win. I'd spent the next 2 days replaying every moment in my head. So when the second game finally came around, I was counting down the hours. This one was against Houston. Not as big as the Christmas matchup we'd already seen, but I didn't care. To me, it might as well have been the finals. We left in the late afternoon. I remember sitting in the back seat of my dad's silver pickup truck, wearing my oversized team hoodie, bouncing with excitement the whole drive. Traffic near downtown was brutal, but I barely noticed. I was too busy staring at the arena every time it came into view between buildings. It looked enormous, like something from another world. When we finally parked and joined the crowds heading inside, I felt that same electric excitement all over again. The smell of popcorn and pretzels hit us the second we entered. Music blasted through the speakers. Fans streamed past in jerseys and winter coats. Everything felt alive. Our seats weren't nearly as good as the first game. We were tucked into the corner of the lower bowl, about 20 rows up. Still, to 7-year-old me, they felt perfect. The game started strong. Our team dominated early. By halftime, we were up by nearly 20 points. That was when my older brother Tyler suggested we grab food before the second half rush. My dad wanted barbecue from one stand, my mom wanted nachos from another, so we split up. Dad headed one way, Mom followed. Tyler stayed with me in line at a concession stand near section 214. I remember being impatient. Kids don't handle waiting well, especially not when there are flashing lights and giant foam fingers everywhere. After about 15 minutes of standing there, I wandered a few steps toward a nearby trash can to throw away an empty candy box. It was only maybe 30 feet from Tyler. I could still see him. That's when a man approached me. He looked to be in his late 30s. Tall, broad shoulders, short blonde hair. He wore a dark blue jacket and jeans. Nothing remarkable about him. The kind of person you'd never notice twice in a crowd. He crouched slightly so his face was closer to mine. "Hey there," he said with an easy smile. "You okay?" I nodded. "You look a little lost." "I'm not lost." He glanced around theatrically, pretending to search the area. "Really? I don't see your family." I pointed toward Tyler in line, but Tyler had shifted forward with the crowd, and his back was turned. The man frowned. Well, arena security asked me to help kids who get separated. Want me to walk you over to the guest services desk? They can page your parents." At 7 years old, adults naturally seemed trustworthy, especially in a place full of uniforms, staff, and bright lights. I hesitated. Then he gently took my hand. That part still makes my stomach turn. I remember how normal it felt in the moment, like a teacher leading a student somewhere. "Come on," he said. "Won't take long." And I went with him. We moved away from the concession area. At first, I assumed we were heading towards some information booth, but instead, he led me up a long concrete ramp toward the upper levels of the arena. The crowd thinned the higher we climbed. The bright noise of the lower concourse faded. The air grew quieter, colder. My stomach started to knot. I looked around. No security desk, no staff, just empty corridors and maintenance doors. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Almost there." His grip tightened slightly. That was the first moment something felt wrong. We reached the top level. The arena was nearly empty up there. A few distant people passed now and then, but no one close enough to notice us. The man stopped near a service hallway toward a set of emergency stairwell doors. He pulled out his phone and pretended to check something. That's when I noticed his hands. No staff badge, no wristband, nothing identifying him as arena personnel, just rough knuckles and dirty nails. A wave of panic hit me. I remembered something my teacher drilled into our class during safety week. If an adult tries to take you somewhere and your parents didn't say it was okay, run. The man released my hand for just a second while looking at his screen. I didn't think. I just ran, as fast as I could. My sneakers slapped against the concrete. Behind me, I heard him shout. Then footsteps. He was chasing me. I bolted down the ramp, heart hammering so hard it hurt. I didn't even know where I was going. I just kept moving. People turned to look as I sprinted past. I reached the crowded lower concourse and shoved through clusters of fans until I spotted Tyler near the concession stand. I crashed into him, nearly knocking over his soda. Whoa, what happened? I was breathing too hard to answer. I turned to look back. The man stood at the top of the ramp, watching. He wasn't running anymore. He just stood there. And then he smiled, a small, knowing smile, before disappearing back into the crowd. I wanted to tell Tyler everything. I should have, but kids think strangely when they're scared. I was terrified I'd get blamed for wandering off, terrified my parents would be angry. So, when Tyler asked again what happened, I just shook my head. Nothing. He frowned but let it go. A few minutes later, our parents returned with food. I said nothing. I sat through the second half in silence. The crowd roared around me. The team won big. Everyone celebrated. But I barely watched. I kept scanning the arena, convinced I'd see that man again. And deep down, I had the horrible feeling that he wasn't finished with me yet. That feeling stayed with me all the way through the ride home. I sat unusually quiet in the back seat while my parents talked about the game. My dad kept replaying one incredible dunk. My brother argued that the refs had missed at least 3 obvious fouls. Normally, I would have joined in. I would have been bouncing around, reliving every big play and begging to go again. But that night, I barely said a word. I kept staring out the rear window of Dad's truck, watching the headlights behind us. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid. Every vehicle looked suspicious. Every pair of headlights felt too close. Then, about 20 minutes into the drive, a black pickup suddenly sped up behind us. It rode our bumper so aggressively that even my dad muttered, "What's this idiot doing?" The truck swerved into the lane beside us. Its horn blared, long and sharp. I jumped. The sound ripped through the car like an alarm. Dad glanced over and immediately rolled down his window. "What's your problem?" The truck matched our speed. For a few seconds, it stayed perfectly beside us. That was when I looked over and froze. The driver was the same man. Even in the dim highway lighting, I recognized him instantly. The broad shoulders, the short blonde hair, the sharp outline of his face. There were at least 2 other men in the cab with him, their faces obscured in shadow. The driver turned his head slowly toward my window and smiled. That same awful smile. I felt all the air leave my lungs. He knew which truck was ours. He had followed us from the arena. I wanted to scream, to tell my parents everything. But fear locked my throat shut. The truck stayed beside us for another few seconds before accelerating ahead and disappearing into the darkness. My parents brushed it off as some road rage idiot. My brother laughed nervously and said people drove crazy after games. No one noticed how pale I'd gone. No one noticed my hands shaking in my lap. I stayed silent, and that silence became one of the biggest regrets of my life. We got home just after 11. Our neighborhood was quiet, most houses dark except for Christmas lights blinking softly along the street. I went straight to my room. My parents assumed I was exhausted. They were probably right. But sleep didn't come easy. I kept seeing that man's face, the way he'd smiled at me from his truck, the way he'd watched me from the top of that ramp. Eventually, sometime after midnight, I drifted off. Then, I woke to light flashing across my bedroom wall. At first, I thought I was dreaming. The light moved in slow arcs, sweeping across my ceiling. I sat up. It was coming from outside my window. My room was on the first floor, facing the side yard. Heart pounding, I crept closer and pulled the curtain back an inch. A man stood outside, shining a flashlight directly into my room. It was him. There was no doubt. The same man from the arena, the same jacket, the same face. He was standing just a few feet from the glass, smiling. I screamed, loud enough that my throat hurt. He bolted instantly, vanishing into the darkness. My parents rushed into my room seconds later. I was hysterical, trying to explain. "There was a man outside, the guy from the game." Dad grabbed the baseball bat from the hall closet and ran outside. Mom called his name from the doorway as he searched the yard. He came back 20 minutes later, empty-handed. No footprints, no sign of anyone. It had been cold, but not cold enough for snow. The ground was too dry to leave tracks. My parents assumed I'd had a nightmare. Even after I insisted otherwise, they gently dismissed it. They told me I was overtired from the excitement of the game, that my imagination had filled in the blanks. And because I still hadn't told them what happened at the arena, I couldn't fully explain why I knew what I'd seen. So I let it go, at least outwardly. Inside, I was terrified. The next 2 days passed uneasily. I kept checking windows, double-checking locks, jumping at every sound outside. Then came New Year's Eve. My parents had invited neighbors over to watch the countdown. The house was full of laughter, music, and conversation. For the first time since the game, I almost felt normal again. Then, around 11:59, the doorbell rang. No one was expecting anyone else. Dad answered. From where I sat on the living room floor, I couldn't see the doorway, but the second I heard the voice, ice flooded my veins. Low, calm, unmistakable. It was him. I ran to the hall. Standing on our porch was the same man. He wore a heavy brown coat this time and held a stack of papers. "Sorry to bother you. I'm helping my cousin look for his missing dog, just passing out flyers." Dad accepted one. The man's eyes drifted past him and landed on me. His smile widened slightly. I screamed. My parents stared at me in shock. "That's him! That's the man from the game!" The man's expression shifted instantly. Not fear, not surprise. Something colder, like annoyance. Then he turned and walked quickly down the porch steps. Dad shouted after him. By the time he reached the driveway, the man was already climbing into a dark pickup parked down the street. It sped off before Dad could get close enough to read the plate. That was when I finally told them everything. The arena, the ramp, the chase, the flashlight at my window, all of it. I'll never forget the look on my parents' faces as they realized I'd been telling the truth. They called the police immediately. Officers took statements and searched the neighborhood. Nothing. No truck, no trace. For months afterwards, my parents became intensely protective. They changed our home security system, installed cameras, walked me everywhere. And I never attended another game. Not for years. Then, when I was 15, something happened that still keeps me awake some nights. On New Year's Eve, exactly 8 years later, I found a folded note tucked under the windshield wiper of my first car. There was no envelope, no name, just a single sentence written in blocky black letters. Next time, you won't run." We reported it. Again, nothing came of it. No fingerprints, no camera footage, no witnesses. I'm 19 now. I still love basketball. I even went back to Metroplex Arena last year for the first time. Nothing happened. No one approached me. No notes, no sightings. But even now, every time I'm in a crowded arena concourse and a stranger gets too close, I feel that same panic rise in my chest. Because somewhere out there is a man who once tried to take a 7-year-old boy. And for reasons I'll never understand, he never quite let go. My name is Daniel, and this happened in early December about 10 years ago in a place called Pine Hollow, Colorado. I've only been back to those mountains once since then, and even that was a mistake. What happened there didn't feel like a normal bad experience. It felt planned, like we walked into something that was already waiting for us. Back then, I was 32, married to my wife Laura, and we had a 7-year-old son named Ethan. Ethan was obsessed with Christmas, not just the gifts or decorations, but the idea of doing things the old way, as he called it. Real trees, real snow, real cold air. So when Laura found a listing online for a Christmas tree cutting area up in the mountains, she thought it would be perfect. A small designated forest area where families could come, hike a short trail, and cut down their own tree legally. It sounded harmless, even fun. We decided to make a day of it. We packed snacks, warm clothes, flashlights just in case, and drove up early one Saturday morning. The further we drove from the city, the quieter everything became. Phone signal dropped, gas stations disappeared, even the traffic faded until it was just us on a winding road cutting through pine-covered hills. Ethan pressed his face against the window the entire ride. "Are we in the North Pole yet?" he kept asking. Laura laughed every time. By the time we reached the designated parking area, the sky had turned a dull gray. Snow from the previous night still clung to the ground, even though it wasn't actively snowing. There were only 2 other cars parked there. It felt isolated, but not unsafe, at least at first. A small wooden sign marked the beginning of a trail. Beyond it, trees stretched out endlessly, thick and dark green, fading into mist. We grabbed our jackets and started walking. Ethan ran ahead immediately, kicking snow and laughing. Laura stayed close to me, holding my arm. There was something about the silence in that forest that felt heavier than it should have been. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of our boots on frozen ground. After about 10 minutes, the parking lot disappeared completely behind the trees. Only the trail remained. Ethan kept pointing out trees he thought were the one. Too skinny, too tall, too ugly. We were laughing, but I remember noticing how quickly the light was fading the deeper we went. Not because of time, because of the trees closing in overhead. That was when I first heard it. Footsteps behind us. Not ours. Not deer either. They were slow, measured, like someone trying not to be heard. I stopped walking. Laura noticed immediately. "What is it?" she whispered. I turned slowly. At first I saw nothing, just the empty trail. Then I saw him. A man standing between 2 trees about 20 yards back. He was wearing a dark coat that didn't look warm enough for the weather. No hat, no gloves. His posture was strange, too still, like he'd been standing there a long time without moving. Laura instinctively pulled Ethan closer. The man didn't wave, didn't speak. He just watched us. Then, slowly, he started walking, not towards us directly, just forward along the same trail, matching our direction. Laura leaned in and said quietly, "We should go back." I nodded immediately. Something about him didn't feel right. We turned around to head back toward the parking lot. That was when the man spoke. "Looking for a tree?" His voice carried strangely through the woods,
calm, almost friendly, but it didn't match his face. Laura answered quickly, "No, we're just walking." He nodded like he understood. Then he added, "You're in the permitted area. You can cut one if you want." I didn't like that he knew it was permitted land, or that he seemed so sure of where we were. Ethan, of course, was curious. "Can we cut one?" I said. "No," I said firmly. The man smiled faintly when he heard that. Not a warm smile. Something tighter, like he was watching a decision unfold that he expected. We started walking faster back toward the parking lot. The trail felt longer now, like the forest had shifted while we weren't looking. Every few seconds I glanced back. He was still there, but always a little closer than before. Never running, just closing distance slowly. Laura whispered, "Don't look back again." But I couldn't help it. The third time I turned, he was only maybe 10 yards behind us. Ethan started to sense something was wrong. "Why is that man following us?" he asked. Laura told him to stay close and keep walking. We picked up speed. The crunch of snow behind us didn't stop. It stayed steady, right behind us. Always. And then I saw something that made my stomach drop. The trail markers we had followed earlier were gone, or at least I couldn't see them anymore. The path didn't look the same. The trees were denser, closer, like we were being funneled deeper instead of out. Laura noticed too. "We should be back by now," she said, her voice tighter. I checked my phone. No signal. Battery still full, but useless. That was when I realized something worse. We couldn't hear the parking lot anymore. No cars, no voices, no anything. Just the man behind us, still walking, still closing in. And then Ethan said something that made both of us stop walking completely. "Dad, I don't think that's the same way we came in."
The moment Ethan said that, the entire forest felt different. Not just quiet, wrong. Laura pulled him closer immediately. "I think we need to move," she said, her voice tight. I nodded, but I was already scanning the trees, trying to recognize anything familiar. Nothing looked right anymore. The path we had been following wasn't really a path anymore. It was just snow between trees that all looked the same. Behind us, the man was still there. Closer now. Maybe 15 feet. Maybe less. He still wasn't rushing. That was the worst part. He didn't need to. Laura whispered, "We're going to run when I say go." I tightened my grip on Ethan's hand. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Go," she said. We ran. Ethan tried to keep up, but I lifted him halfway so he wouldn't slip on the snow. Branches scratched past my face. My breath burned in my chest. Behind us, I heard movement finally change. The slow footsteps stopped, then started again faster. Not sprinting, just faster walking that turned into a jog. He was following. Laura kept looking back. "I can still see him," she shouted. That made me run harder. We pushed through trees, not even caring about the trail anymore. We just needed to reach the parking lot. Something solid, something real. After what felt like minutes, but could have been seconds, we burst into a clearing. And my stomach dropped. There was no parking lot, just more trees. Laura stopped so suddenly I almost ran into her. No, we went the wrong way," she said. Ethan started crying. That's when I realized we were lost, completely lost, and the man was still behind us. We turned slowly. He was there, at the edge of the clearing, watching, now much closer than before. Maybe 30 feet. He tilted his head slightly, like he was studying us. Then he said, "You're almost there." Laura yelled, "Leave us alone!" Her voice echoed through the trees, but he didn't react. Instead, he stepped forward again. One slow step, then another. That's when I noticed something on the ground near us. Fresh footprints. Not ours.
leading from the trees into the clearing. They didn't match our direction. They were already here before we arrived, like someone had been circling us the entire time. Laura saw them too. Her face went pale. "I think there are more," she whispered. I didn't understand what she meant until I looked up again. Between the trees surrounding the clearing, I started seeing movement, shapes. At first, I thought they were shadows, but then one of them shifted, and I saw a second figure, then another. At least 3, all standing still, all watching. They weren't dressed like hikers. They were dressed like him. Dark coats, wrong for the weather. No gear, no backpacks, just standing in silence between the trees, like they'd been there the whole time. Ethan grabbed my sleeve. "Dad," he whispered. The man in front of us smiled again, and this time, it wasn't faint, it was clear. He said, "You came further than most." Laura pulled Ethan behind her. I stepped forward slightly, putting myself between them and the man. "What do you want?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked past me at Laura and Ethan, like we were already part of something he'd decided. Then he said, "You should have stayed on the marked path." That's when Laura noticed something else. Our tire tracks. They were visible near the edge of the clearing where we had originally come in. But they weren't just there. They were cut off, cleanly, like something had been blocking or circling the exit trail long before we noticed. Laura whispered, "Daniel, we can't go back that way." The man took another step forward. The figures in the trees didn't move. They just watched. And then something unexpected happened. A sound. Far off, but real. A siren. It was faint at first, barely cutting through the forest, but it was there. The man stopped immediately, his head tilted slightly, listening. The figures in the trees shifted for the first time, like they didn't expect it. The siren grew louder, closer. Laura grabbed Ethan and pulled him toward the direction of the sound. "Run!" I shouted. We didn't think. We just ran towards it. Behind us, I heard movement again. But this time, it wasn't steady. It was scattered, like they were suddenly unsure. Branches snapped, footsteps moved in different directions. Then one of them shouted something I couldn't understand. Not words I recognized, more like a warning. We broke through the trees into a narrow service road, just as the sirens reached full volume. A sheriff's SUV came into view, spotlights sweeping the forest. The second they saw us, they stopped. 2 deputies jumped out immediately. "Get in the vehicle," one of them yelled. We didn't hesitate. Ethan was crying so hard he could barely breathe. Laura kept repeating, "There were people in there! There were people in there!" The deputies looked at each other but didn't question it right away. One of them grabbed a radio and started speaking quickly. The other stayed with us, scanning the tree line with a flashlight. When I looked back into the woods from the safety of the road, I saw them one last time. The man was standing at the edge of the trees again, still watching. But now, he wasn't smiling. He just stood there. And then, slowly, he stepped back into the darkness, like he was never really leaving, just stopping for now. The deputies searched for a long time after that, but they didn't find anyone. No bodies, no camps, no clear footprints beyond the first line of trees. Just broken snow and scattered marks that didn't make sense. They told us it was probably illegal squatters deep in the forest, people who didn't want to be found. But none of it explained how they moved so quietly, or how they seemed to know exactly where we were. We never went back, not even once. And I still think about something the man said before everything fell apart. "You came further than most." I don't know what that means, and I don't think I want to.